Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, joins me now from the GOP convention in Tampa to talk about the conservative case for, yes, tax reform. Grover, welcome.
Good to be with you.
Grover, just for the record before we start, have both Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan signed your pledge not to increase taxes?
Governor Romney has signed it in 2008 and again in 2012. He just referenced it last week, saying he'd made a written commitment not to raise taxes, and Paul Ryan has taken it and kept it as a congressman. Okay.
Now, Grover, this country has not had a major tax reform since Ronald Reagan did a deal with Tip O'Neill in 1986. The plan that Mitt Romney put out in February, is that comparable to the '86 deal? And if so, how?
Well, it is. It brings us back very much towards where we were in '86. There's been some backsliding with both George Herbert Walker Bush raising rates and Bill Clinton raising rates, and then with Obama adding a lot of tax deductions and credits. What Romney's talking about doing, what Paul Ryan does in his plan, are to bring us down to a top rate of about 28% under Romney, which is exactly where we were with Reagan, while eliminating deductions and credits.
Now, Grover, it's easy for politicians, particularly on the conservative side, to talk about cutting taxes, but I want to talk politics with you here. We could see, for example, a democratically controlled Senate, Paul Ryan out of the House, not there to keep those Republicans in the House in line. Let's say Mr. Romney wins come November. Politically, is it possible for him to get this kind of bold reform plan through?
Yes, because the Republicans will hold the House, and even with Ryan in the vice presidency, they've all voted once for the Ryan plan, which is serious entitlement reform and serious tax reform, top rate 25% corporate and individual. On the Senate side, remember, 2 years from now, in 2014, there are 20 Democrats up for re-election, at least half of whom are likely to lose in an average year because they were elected on a fluke in 2008, very bad year for Republicans. The leverage that Republicans will have is you have 10 very scared Democrats for the next 2 years going into 2014, and that's where you can get the votes for tax reform, even if the Ds held the Senate, which I don't think they will, but it's not impossible.
Oh, Grover, I want to talk to you a little bit about Mitt Romney's ideological commitment to cutting taxes. As you said at the beginning, he signed your pledge. Many other Republicans have. But when he talks about tax reform, he still distinguishes, for example, between deductions for what he calls middle-income families and deductions for the top 1%. He'd preserve it for the former, preserve it for the former, but not for the latter. What does that say to you about his understanding of what marginal tax rates do for economic growth?
Well, there is a danger that if you phase out deductions, credits, exemptions for higher income people, that you recreate higher marginal tax rates, even if nominally they're lower. So I think that's something to be careful about, and I know that with Paul Ryan in the White House and with the Republican majorities in the House and Senate, with Hatch in the Senate, with Camp Ways and Means on the House side, I think you're going to get a serious lower marginal tax rate and the elimination of deductions and credits in a way that won't create higher marginal tax rates.
Grover, very briefly, we've got less than a minute left. The fiscal tax cliff that we are looking at come January 1st, what kind of damage, in your view, would this do to the economy?
It's a $500 billion tax increase if nothing is done. I believe we will avoid it completely with Romney and a Republican House and Senate voting to continue all of the lapse tax cuts while they do tax reform next year.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it at that. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, thank you so much for being with us today.